My name is Cora Patterson, Senior Manager of 211 Miami, a program of Jewish Community Services of South Florida, and I'm excited to be moderating a virtual conversation with Walter Schlomann, Shanee Epstein, and Moshe Weidenfeld, Ezra's parents and executive producers from the movie Ezra, May His Memory Be for a Blessing, which is premiering at this year's festival. Thank you all for joining us. Can you tell us about yourselves, where you are from, where you have lived, and where you live now, and how you got into filmmaking?
So just to revamp, my name is Moshe Weidenfeld, and this is my wife, Shanee Epstein. And the question was about getting started with the film. Was that the first question?
The first question is just to tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you're from, where you have lived, and how you got into the filmmaking.
You want to start?
Sure. I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, and then went out to Western Massachusetts, met Moshe, got married, had Rafi, and then moved to New York for, I think, 32 years, where I went to art school and did my art and was an educator. And we had our second son, Ezra, in New York in 1992. And then just recently, last year, we came back to Western Mass and are spending half a year in Deerfield and half a year in Yaffo, Israel, or all over Israel, actually. And that's kind of like where we've been. And this movie really is Moshe's baby, so I'm going to let him speak about how it came to be.
Okay, so the last part of what Shanee said obviously overlaps with me, but I was born in Long Island, New York, in Massapequa, otherwise known as Matza Pizza to those who live there. And then came up to Western Massachusetts. My parents moved us up there when my brothers and I were teenagers. And so I spent a lot of time in Western Massachusetts, Amherst area. I went to University of Massachusetts, and then, as Shanee mentioned, we got married and lived in Northampton, where our first son was born. I'm a musician by passion. I've been since we have married. I've been a public school teacher. I was a teacher for the last 35 years and just retired, and we're in Israel now, as Shanee says, as we speak. As far as the movie, the starting of the movie, it really came about in kind of a I think it's discussed in the movie itself, but I'll just sort of, the snippet is that as a musician, after losing our son, it felt like the natural, if you can use the word natural, the response would be a musical response, that somehow, that I would be able to let out emotion and feelings about our son and about the loss, that somehow I'd be able to channel it through music. And that turned out to be very, very difficult, and for many reasons. And at a certain point, I decided that I think there were a lot of things that went into it, but I decided that I wanted to have some kind of homage, a way of keeping him alive, keeping his memory alive. And that was where the idea of a movie came through, which is not something that I have any training in, that no skill set of making movies, but I tried my best. I had a friend who was very helpful in helping me buy a camera, and I did start. Some of you see little snippets in the movie that Walter very graciously included. Where possible. There was a number of problems with the audio in that situation, But as we see from today, technology is challenging for those of us, that are not necessarily, predestined for that. So anyway, the movie sort of became an outgrowth of just our experience of loss. Loss takes many different expressions over the course of time, and I think again, I think Walter, once he and I decided that he was going to take it on as a project, which was an amazing thing, because that's what he does, and he's such a special person, and he's part of our family, I'd like to say. As a matter of fact, he and his family were with us the Sabbath before Ezra took his life. Just as it happens, he reminded me that later. I didn't even remember that, but that's how close we were. That we've been in each other's lives. We studied Torah together. Not enough. We should do it again. But anyway, so I don't know if that helps.
Can you tell us some of your challenges in making the film and how you confronted them?
Oh, I'll speak to that. The difficulties that I've had are not the making of the movie. They're the experiences that led us to make the movie. So it's not the film itself now as a product is kind of more a sense of pride for me, and I think for us, that we're putting it out there for conversation. So that's what I would say about what was difficult about making the movie.
The process of going through the materials, the journals. One thing that Walter made a point of. I think he's coming back here, but he made a point of I think putting in text in the movie that the journals that Ezra kept were really his own. They were private for the longest time. We respected his privacy. Until a certain warnings came about, in which case all bets were off. But by that point, unfortunately, it was after the fact. But going through a lot of those journals was very painful to see some of to read his experiences as a teenager, things that he was going through. Also, just seeing his image constantly, it was very difficult. His voice. One of the things that I managed to do, which was quite a challenge, was to get into his iPod. He had a particular device that allowed him to record into his iPod. That was back in the days, when you didn't have everything included together. And I had a guy from Apple, a friend of mine, who actually helped us to get that. And Walter, in turn, and I'll pass it to him, Walter took a lot of that material and used it throughout the film, Ezra's own musical ideas and discoveries. So Walter, maybe now that you're back.
Oh, hi. I'll jump right in with the music, because that's one of the more amazing aspects of the film, in that once, took a while for Moshe to get the music, but once we received the music, downloaded it, it amazed me how much of that music fit in to different aspects of the film. And there's some sound effects as well as music. There's some happier, more comical scenes where the music accompanies. And of course, there's some very dramatic, emotional scenes where the music also fits in. So he had quite a range in the music that some of it he composed, some of it he was just playing. And it really fit in quite astoundingly to the story that we were telling. And that, just back a little bit, I mean, I think one of the issues with the film and one of the challenges was portray Ezra not just through other people, through his parents and all those that knew him, but what was Ezra's voice. And fortunately, you know, Moshe Shanee had a lot of materials, his journals, his artwork, which is, you know, everybody comments on the power of his artwork, and his music. And between that and the photographs and the home movies, we you know, told his story.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that, I feel like that is what happens in the film is you're surrounded of Ezra, like his music, his words, his art, and he was quite a kind of, you know, special, powerful kid. And when we were talking about making the movie, that was one of the things we wanted, was to put Ezra there so people who didn't know him or knew him can get a sense of Ezra. And I think that Walter succeeded in that, partly because Ezra left us so much material. Like, he was so prolific in all of these things for this young person who wasn't even 17. And so, you know, I was also thinking that you create something very, very rich, right? But it's kind of like, bottom line, it's about somebody who stopped there and didn't reach amazing potential that he had. So that, I think, is kind of like, you know, I had said I felt pride about the film, but kind of alongside every emotion of the film, or doing talks or this or that, is just the sadness that he isn't here. So, you know, I think that Walter, you know, really helped us, because first of all, making a movie is just so technical, and this was Moshe's baby, but neither of us have any skill in that area. And but there was such a back and forth all the time about what's in the film, what we're taking out, what needs to go in, what isn't strong enough, what says something in a way we don't want it to be heard. Like, really carefully thinking about not just paying homage to Ezra, but what is this film going to do in terms of people now dealing with depression, mental health, suicide. So we were very, very deliberate and careful and thoughtful about what we put in and what we didn't put in. And they're all just really like sparks to begin conversation.
A note on the dramatic, sort of like the cut, you know, Ezra taking his life and that stoppage. There are elements in the film that I've tried to include that, you know, may not be obvious on your first go round when you're watching it, but you know, there are lots of breaks, so to speak, breaks in music instead of fades, breaks, cuts in the picture instead of fades as well. So there's that element of shock and suddenness that's overlaid through the film beyond just content. I want to retrace one thing because I missed the beginning, but I just want to say, I thought about this today and it really came around full circle in terms of the making of the film, because I had made a presentation at the Center for Jewish Heritage in New York that you came to, but I forgot that one of the films that you saw, Mrs. H, we'll call her, Mrs. H, which was, she was a Holocaust survivor. The reason that I made that film, one of the reasons was that I had gone to your art gallery, Shanee, for one of your shows. I don't remember when it was. It might have, I'm not sure if it was, it wouldn't have been in 2011. No, it might have been. It might have been the Ezra show. But in any case,
that was 2010. Yeah.
Oh, might have been. And did you have a show after that?
2013, probably.
No, would have been, so it was the 2010 show,
Yeah.
and into her son there at the
Oh,
art, and we started talking in the film again.
wow.
So we came around full circle. And then Moshe had seen the presentation at the Center for Jewish History Heritage, and he knew a little bit about what I've done.
I was there too, yeah.
And you're right, you both of you were there, yes. And that's how I think we reconnected in terms of making the film.
Right.
I mean, parenthetically, Walter was working at his previous, whatever you want to call it, incarnation, Salt and Pepper, in the west side of Manhattan. I was teaching over there, and I'm a music teacher, as I said in the introduction, and I was doing some, I think, pretty amazing things with young people there, performances, and I called Walter up one time.
Wow.
And he was actually, he and some of his associates were involved in videotaping some of that stuff, which was some of it's pretty amazing footage. We never took it, anywhere, but these were immigrant students who were performing in their own cultures and each other's cultures. It was an amazing thing. So I already had a touch of Walter's, professional genius. I had already been exposed to that, aside from our friendship, as I mentioned, when he was off camera.
Yeah, I think that to underline that, I'm not sure how it would have been to make this film about Ezra with somebody different than Walter, because I always felt that Walter was so sensitive, but also willing to make changes if we felt that should be done. And it's a complicated film because it's a complicated story, and just so that was a very nice process working with Walter on this film. I know it was a lot of hours for him.
Many hours.
But I think he really did pull things together in a very integrated way.
Just a note about that, because I don't think, you haven't been involved in many films, but if you were called to if you're going to call yourself executive producers, which you are, you gave me a lot of freedom and a lot of ability. I would come to you with mass 2 hours, 3 hours, but it was, from my point of view, you trusted me a lot. And I was thinking, one of the reasons that I think you did that, besides our relationship, is that you're artists and you create. And when, no one is telling you what to paint when you're painting or making a collage, and Moshe with your music as well. So I think really it comes from what it's like to create something. And yes, we made a lot of changes and we discussed many things, but if you look at the picture, that you also gave me a lot of freedom, and I thank you for that. Putting the story together. yeah. So,
Walter, in the beginning, I did want to ask you if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you live, where you're from, experience, and how you got to making the film.
I'm originally from Brazil, and it turns out that there are a couple of Brazilian references in the film, which I didn't plan, but that's, we talk about capoeira in the film. Moshe talks about his first album that he gets from Sergio Mendes. And so, I'm originally from Brazil. I've lived in New York most of my life, in Brooklyn, New York, and Manhattan on occasion. And I've moved to Tampa about 8 years ago. So I'm now in Florida, not too far away from. I've been working in film for a long time. The first documentary that I worked on was back in the days of Big Doc in Haiti. It was I worked pretty much for the same amount of money that I worked on this film. No, it was a low budget production, and we snuck into Haiti to film. That was the adventure there, and that was in the early 80s. But that was my mission. I was the assistant, and my mission was to smuggle in film rolls. And so that was a big deal for me. So that's in the early 80s. And, you know, in terms of my career, I've worked as an assistant cameraman and video engineer and cameraman. And I did many years of editing all sorts of projects, long form, short form, music videos, commercials. And then about, I guess around 2009 or so, 2009, I started making these films that are family heritage films. So they're films where they preserve the stories of elders for future generations. And those are the films that Moshe saw and he knew about that I made. And that's why he thought about Ezra. And one of the things we talked about early on was the idea that this wasn't going to be just for him and Shanee and Rafi, Ezra's brother, but it was going to be, it really had a story that was meaningful and impactful for a great audience, which is what we believe. The story is very important to bring awareness to all these issues. And we decided that we would make a film that would both honor Ezra and bring a discussion to the outside world. That's a little bit about my background and how I got involved in the film.
Thank you, Walter. The next question is for Shanee. In the film, you talked about the importance of safety planning, and can you share again what the importance of safety planning is and how it can be implemented?
Yes. When I'm talking about safety planning, I'm talking about safety plans for somebody who has been suicidal or had suicide ideations and is thinking about hurting themselves. It's really time that people around them form a net and have a safety plan. So I have a safety plan because I've had very bad depression and 3 suicide attempts. So my safety plan, and we're actually putting together a website and we'll have a connection to it, but it's something that somebody should do with their therapist or a good friend or somebody who knows them. And basically it says, if this person starts doing this, which is, let's say for me, not being able to get out of bed other than smoking cigarettes, you know, like just being in that really bad place, then it's time to stop asking the patient, the person, what they need. Then it's time for people around them to say, this person is very sick. If they were having a heart attack, they wouldn't ask them, should we take you to the hospital? But somehow with very bad depression, people have the idea that that somebody could just snap out of it or something like that. So the safety plan really is a plan that a group of people know about. Let's say the patient and maybe 4 to 6 people, other people who are very close to them. And they know that if this person starts acting this way and is not like lifted up by, you know, even things that always would lift him or her up, like children or going out for a walk or something, then it's time to step in and make sure the person is safe. That's really what a safety plan is for, is to make sure somebody who has suicidal ideations or even plans is kept safe, because that will pass. That very, very, very bad feeling passes, but it's to keep them safe while they're in that very bad place. And anybody who has attempted suicide or been in a psychiatric hospital and has thought about it or whatever, should look into the idea of having a safety plan and should be with their family and their therapist.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Moshe, what was your overall experience in telling Ezra's story?
Well, I said a little bit earlier, just, the painful part, obviously, of the joy and the pain, the joy of reliving certain experiences and, the materials, I was thinking, I just wrote a note to myself in the previous question. Well, part of what we talked about in terms of the resources that we had, Walter said and Shanee said Shanee said that we had, a lot of stuff. I mean, if you think about what people have nowadays on their phones, what they have access, how many videos, we really had very little in reality. We had some, video camera stuff, and we had the music. I guess from my point of view,
You mean from Ezra?
For Ezra
and all his art.
So we had all his art, we had all of the writings, those were physical things. But in terms of the video piece of it, I say, like, in terms times being what they are, just a few years later, the iPhones just exploded on society, But before that, I told you he was using his iPhone, what do you call it, iPod and he had a special gizmo that he added to it to be able to record. There's so much I could talk about as far as what it felt like. It was the really highs and the real lows. One of the things that we talk about a bit in the movie, and we have a representative, the founder of Makom Shalom, which is actually taking place tonight. It happens the second Wednesday of every month. It's taking place tonight in the States. I'll be staying up super late so that I can participate, but it is a group of support for survivors of suicide. And I think that the process of this, I would talk about that I was making a film sometimes when we would meet, and there were actually other people in the group who had lost loved ones, whether children or spouses or other people in their lives. And there were a couple of other people who were actually attempting to do something in that nature, but it was very important to have that place. One of the things we all talk about that in the group is that it's just it's a different kind of loss. It's a loss, but it's a loss that has so much baggage around it in terms of, we talk a lot about the taboo and, both religious and social and political, and there's all these different things. The bottom line is that, God forbid anybody should experience it. It's something that no one wants to experience. So anyway, I got a little off the track there, but you get the gist.
A little bit about the difficulty as well. First of all, both Moshe and Shanee and everybody in the film really had a lot of courage to participate in the film and to tell their story. It took a lot of guts to do that. But especially for Moshe and Shanee, when they were seeing the film, it brought on a whole other, they revisited all these things again. And just to give you an insight, an example of my, obviously I knew Ezra, but I'm not his parent. There were dozens and dozens of times that I would leave the edit room with tears. And I knew what the scenes were. I knew what people were going to say, and it still moved me. So that it's not an easy process, and there's a lot of emotion attached to it, and there's a lot of courage that you went through. And like you said, there are ups and downs in life, and there's ups and downs in when you see the film. I did try, and we all tried to also intersperse it with a lot of anecdotes and humor. So I don't want people to think that it's it's all it's a nonstop, depressing film.
Downer.
But it's not a downer, correct? But for us who were involved in seeing it over and over again, it definitely takes its toll. And that was difficult for me. I don't think I was ever as invested in a project to the emotional extent that I was in this one, both because on a personal level and because of the subject matter. And one point about the subject matter, and you brought it up in terms of survivors, there were three focuses. It was Ezra, it was the story of suicide and teen suicide. But I think what is a little different about our film is that we spend a good deal of time on the issue of survivors. What happens, when you feel like it's the end of the line, and then how do different people make their way back, and how, and everybody has their own way of doing it. And that's expressed in the film. But, I think spending time on survivors will give other people out there who have gone through something like this, the ability to take a breath and say, yes, this is what it's like. This is what I went through. This is what I'm going through. But there is some way to continue living one's life. And I thought that we all thought that was important to say.
I think, I absolutely agree with you. And not only living our lives, but living our lives with joy. It doesn't mean that losing Ezra is any less of a just devastating and painful experience. But I feel like on some level, losing him made me appreciate every single thing I have even more. So I've just been so aware of like every little flower, every, beautiful thing that I see on the street or in, whatever, or children or whatever, is that like there's some level that the pain and the loss, the joy and the fun kind of shines is really important. And I've actually really made sure that I have a good amount of joy in my life, because I need it, and why not? And so, that is the thing, is it is important, because at the beginning it really was like, how are we going to make it to tomorrow? Like, how are we going to forget heal? It was like even just taking each step was painful, but through a lot of help and a lot of support, I feel like we're all doing really well, and so that's part of the story.
So just add to that Shanee, had mentioned one of the outgrowths of this is a website which will have different kinds of resources. One for sure will be a link to Makom Shalom, which is the group that's a support group for survivors of suicide. I just wanted to put that in.
Thank you. Go ahead, Walter.
I was just going to say, for Moshe, especially, but for Shanee also, but Moshe really, I think the Makom Shalom was really, Makor Shalom was really quite an important aspect of your healing, and I think you want to make sure that other people have that opportunity.
Yes, it's important. There's been times, I think Shanee will attest to this as well. There's been times that I didn't go, that when we were meeting, here we are meeting Zoom, right? And then we're, of course, the COVID that we've all experienced. So when I look back to the times that it was possible to meet in Manhattan in this office building where we met, there was something very special about physically being in the same room with folks. And sometimes people would come and they wouldn't say a word, or they might introduce themselves, but they didn't feel like talking. But it's the club, as we say, that no one wants to be a member of. But it is a unique situation to have somebody who really knows how you feel. It's nice and very important. All of the people that give feedback and condolences. We've had a lot of feedback on the film already, very powerful responses and offers to people that want to help. But there's something when somebody really understands what you're going through, because I say it's a unique kind of loss. Losing anyone in your life is a very difficult thing. We've all had that. But for losing a child in particular, it's a very It's no words.
Right.
I do want to thank all of you for sharing your experiences today. I will conclude, and I want to thank each of you, Shanee, Moshe, and Walter, for all of your, stories and sharing your experiences about the film. It will definitely make a difference in a lot of people's lives. So I once again thank you to all members, our sponsors, community partners, volunteers, and all of you film lovers for participating in the milestone of the 25th Miami Jewish Film Festival. Thank you.